Alright, here we have a KitchenAid mixer. This is actually an Epicurean, but they're all built very similarly. And it skips a gear, and it kind of holds on a certain spot on the planetary. This part here is called the planetary. It's got all the gears and things, so I'll go ahead and show you. I've got it plugged in. So with no resistance, it'll go around just fine, but as you can see right there, that's not supposed to happen. So we're going to take this apart. First thing you want to do is unplug it. Okay, once you unplug it, you're going to want to get a Phillips, that's the pointy star-shaped screwdriver. And right on the back, this metal band comes off with that screw. Okay, this just comes off and it reveals a bunch of screws. As you can see, we're going to take those out. Now, if you use your mixer for cookies and kind of minor stuff, you know, pretty simple mixes, like cookie dough isn't very tough. But if you're mixing, you know, pounds and pounds of bread dough, or if you are grinding wheat, grinders and attachments like that have a lot of resistance can wear out the teeth in the planetary, and I'll show you that. If you've never taken this apart, you might want a vacuum and a clean workspace, because it can get very dusty underneath this part if you've never taken it apart. I don't think it should be too dusty on my end. That just pops right off. Okay, so here you have the motor. Then this is kind of the control gear panel. And then up here, this gearbox is the planetary box. There's a lot of different things that people call it. We're going to take that off. There's actually a screw right under here. And here, here, and here. So we are going to remove the main board, which is right there, to get to that screw. Now what I'm anticipating finding is a stripped tooth from a gear. And you want to keep track of your screws. You don't want any extra pieces when you put this back together. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that screw in there. Put this screw in here. And I have this little piece of plastic foam. I'm going to use that to put these parts on. It can get very greasy. And if you need a part, if you find the part that you're looking for, you can just find the manual online and it will have a parts list. But oftentimes you can find the part on eBay. For a lot cheaper than other places, but you know, the local places are convenient because they might be right down the street and you want to fix your mixer right away. Okay, so once I take this off, there's going to be a lot of grease. And I'll probably put some gloves on. I'll center this right here. Take this off. And as you can see, so this is the gear for the grinder. And you'll be able to see the wear on it, or maybe metal shards. There's none on here, so that's good. Okay, this is the worm gear, and I'm going to get some gloves on, see what I can find. Okay. So this ring just slides right off, and it exposes this retaining ring here. Okay, so this is the worm gear, and you can tell that it's intact. See, this goes this way. You can tell that it's intact. There's no teeth ground off of that. But on this wheel here has some teeth that are worn off. So I'm going to guess that that's what the problem is. And that one also is fine. So it's this one here. It looks like it's kind of rounded in. And you can see metal shavings down in there. So it's this lower wheel here on the planetary. These are retaining ring pliers, and these take the retaining ring right off. It just fits right into those two little holes. Okay, so that just comes right off. Okay, so right in between there, and it just lifts up, you have that pin. That pin needs to come out. Okay, so this is the bad part. As you may be able to tell, those teeth on that gear are rounded actually. So we'll get the new part and then we'll get going. Okay, so it's been a few days, but the new part came. And I'll put a link in the description below. Now this fits a lot of different KitchenAids. It's a standard part. But I also ordered some grease. So I'm going to clean all of this because there's metal shavings and parts, little bits of metal in there. So I'm going to clean this whole thing out, all of the gears, wipe them down, and put new grease on it. And it's a special kind of grease. Some of them are pretty toxic if you just go to Home Depot and get gear grease or you know, something that you'd put on maybe a semi-truck. Whereas this stuff, it's still not good for you, but it's Whirlpool recommended grease. So I'll put the in fact, it's an actual genuine product of Whirlpool. So I'll put the link to that in the description below. But you want to wipe it all clean. I'm going to do a complete overhaul of all the parts. But you can just order a little bit of this grease. If you're just doing one part, you don't need to do a whole overhaul. So go ahead and clean up the machine. Get it ready to grease back up, and then we'll go to the next step. So the degreasing is something you don't have to degrease the whole machine. I chose to do it, but you can just grease the new part. Okay, so we have the whole machine taken down, degreased. So we'll put the worm gear in, and then we'll get the. We're actually going to grease all the parts as we go, and I'll put a link in the description to where you get this grease. It is a special grease. It's not just any kind of Home Depot grease. Should just use one finger. And you want to be very generous with this. Now sometimes people's planetaries leak the grease. You don't want that to happen either, especially if you don't use the right kind of grease. And you can't use Vaseline. that won't work well. So we're going to go ahead and put this all back together with grease, and we'll go to the next step. So once you degrease, start packing on the grease. You need a lot of it if you're going to do an overhaul of the whole thing, or if you're just replacing a part, I'll put a link to where you can just get enough grease for one part. And make sure you throw some in the actual cover up on by the top of the gear. So the other thing is, if you take both retaining rings off, the smaller ring, at least on my machine, goes on the underside. It's exposed, where the slightly larger ring goes on the shaft in the gearbox. If you don't do that, you may have problems. So while you're putting it all back together, make sure you take your time. You don't want to make any mistakes here. You want to make sure that you assemble it properly so you don't have to take it apart again, or you could do more damage to your machine. So put the screws back on, and then mount the control board. Plug it in and give it a test. And then if it's working fine, then go ahead, turn it off, unplug it, and then finish assembling it. Okay, now this next part's worth doing, so I'll slow it down. Right here is where it mounts to the stand. So just check those screws since you have it open. Sometimes those come loose over time and your machine will kind of wobble. So just check those while you're at it and then get back to work, cleaning it up a little bit as you go. Then there's 4 screws, 2 on each side. And those are the longer screws. Then there's 1 shorter screw for the metal band. And that just secures right in the back there. Screw that on and you are in business. Thanks for watching. I hope that helped. Let me know if you have any questions.